In a quiet little town surrounded by rolling hills and vast fields of golden wheat, there lived an elderly woman named Clara. Her house sat at the edge of the countryside, where life moved slowly, just like the clouds drifting across the sky. The air smelled of fresh earth and wildflowers, and every morning began with birds chirping outside her window. For decades, this place had been her home. But it wasn't always peaceful for Clara, not in the way people might think. Clara's husband, Henry, had passed away 35 years ago, leaving behind a void that no amount of time could completely fill. They'd shared a long life together, full of laughter, arguments, compromises, and moments that made their bond strong. But even in death, Henry left something behind that continued to haunt Clara, a rule he had set long before his passing. That rule was simple yet strange. He forbade her from ever stepping foot into the old barn at the far end of their property. Now, you might wonder why anyone would care so much about keeping someone out of a barn. After all, barns are usually just places to store tools or hay, right? Well, not this one. This barn was different. It stood apart from the rest of the property, its wooden walls covered in thick vines and moss. Its doors were locked tight, and over the years, it became more than just a building. It became a mystery wrapped in silence. Henry's reasons for banning Clara from the barn were never clear. When she asked him about it early in their marriage, he simply said, "It's not safe." And when she pressed further, wanting to know what exactly made it unsafe, he would shake his head firmly and repeat, "Just promise me you'll stay away." There was something in his tone, a mix of seriousness and sadness, that stopped Clara from asking again. So she promised. She didn't understand why, but she trusted him enough to respect his wishes. For years, the barn remained untouched. As seasons changed, nature took its toll on the structure. Rain seeped through the roof, wind rattled the loose boards, and ivy crept up the sides until it almost looked like part of the landscape itself. Clara rarely gave it much thought. Life went on, filled with chores, family visits, and memories, built under the same roof she and Henry had shared. Yet deep down, curiosity lingered. What was inside that barn? Why did Henry guard it so fiercely? The question gnawed at her mind more often as time passed. Friends and neighbors occasionally commented on the barn during gatherings, saying things like, "That old thing looks like it's about to collapse," or "Why don't you tear it down?" But Clara always brushed them off with vague responses like, "Oh, it's just part of the land," or "I haven't gotten around to fixing it yet." Truthfully, she hadn't dared to go near it. Even after Henry's death, his final words echoed in her ears. "Promise me again, Clara. Don't go near the barn, not even after I'm gone." At first, grief kept Clara too busy to dwell on the barn. She buried herself in work around the house, tending to the garden, baking pies, and organizing photo albums filled with pictures of her and Henry. Looking at those photos brought both comfort and pain. Comfort because they reminded her of happier times. Pain because they also reminded her of how many questions remained unanswered. Who was Henry really? Was he the man she thought she knew? Or was there another side to him hidden behind closed doors or perhaps behind the barn's weathered walls? As the years rolled on, Clara grew older. Her hair turned silver, her hands became spotted with age, and her steps slowed. Still, she kept her promise. Family came and went, grandchildren played in the yard, and seasons cycled endlessly. Through it all, the barn stood as a silent sentinel, watching over the land like a forgotten guardian, but promises, no matter how deeply rooted, can weaken with time, especially when curiosity grows stronger. One day, while cleaning out the attic, Clara stumbled upon an old journal tucked away in a dusty box. The cover was worn and the pages yellowed with age. Flipping through it, she found entries written in Henry's familiar handwriting. Most of them were mundane notes about farm work or reminders to fix the fence. But then one entry caught her attention. Dated shortly before their wedding, it read, "I've done what needs to be done. If she finds out, everything will change." "I can't let that happen." Clara froze. Her heart raced as she stared at those words. What did Henry mean? What had he done? And why did it feel like the key to understanding him lay hidden somewhere close by in the very barn he'd forbidden her to enter. That night, sleep eluded her. She tossed and turned, replaying the journal entry in her mind. For the first time in decades, doubt crept into her thoughts. Had she truly known Henry? Or had she only seen the version of him he wanted her to see? The barn loomed larger in her imagination now, no longer just a decrepit structure, but a vault holding secrets that refused to stay buried by dawn. Clara had made up her mind. 35 years was long enough to keep a promise based on fear and uncertainty. Whatever was inside that barn, she needed to know. If Henry's memory and their love was worth anything, she owed it to herself to uncover the truth. With the rising sun casting soft light over the fields, Clara stepped outside, her resolve firm despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The barn waited silently, its shadow stretching toward her like an invitation or a warning. Either way, Clara knew she couldn't turn back now. The days following Clara's discovery of the journal were unlike any she'd experienced in years. Her mind buzzed constantly, replaying Henry's cryptic words over and over again. "I've done what needs to be done. If she finds out, everything will change." Those few sentences haunted her, gnawing at the edges of her peace like a restless wind. Who was she? Was it Clara herself? And what exactly had Henry done that he feared would alter everything? Clara tried to distract herself with routine tasks, gardening, cooking, flipping through old photo albums, but nothing could quiet the storm brewing inside her. Every time she glanced toward the barn, it seemed to grow larger, darker, more imposing. It wasn't just a building anymore. It felt alive, as though it knew something she didn't and was daring her to come closer. Her family noticed the shift in her behavior, though they didn't understand it. Her daughter often called to check on her, asking if everything was okay. "You sound distant, Mom," she said one evening during a phone call. "Is something bothering you?" Clara hesitated before answering. How could she explain what she barely understood herself? Instead, she brushed off the concern with a laugh. "Oh, I'm fine," she said lightly. "Just getting old, I suppose. My memory isn't what it used to be." But deep down, Clara knew it wasn't about forgetting, it was about remembering. For so many years, she'd accepted Henry's rules without question, trusting him completely. Now, doubt crept into her thoughts like a shadow stretching across the floor. Had she truly known the man she married? Or had she only seen the version of him he wanted her to see? One afternoon, while sitting on the porch sipping tea, Clara found herself staring at the barn yet again. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. She thought about all the times Henry had warned her away from it, the sternness in his voice, the way his eyes softened with sadness whenever she asked why. At the time, she'd assumed it was just another quirk of his personality, something harmless but private. But now, those moments felt heavier, carrying meanings she couldn't ignore. What made the barn so special? Why had Henry gone to such lengths to keep her away from it? Clara's curiosity burned brighter than ever, fueled by the nagging feeling that answers lay just beyond those locked doors. Yet the promise she'd made weighed heavily on her shoulders. 35 years ago, she'd vowed to honor Henry's wishes, even after his death. Breaking that promise felt like betraying not only him but also the life they'd built together. Still, there was no denying the pull she felt. Each passing day brought her closer to the edge of decision. She began spending more time near the barn, walking slowly around its perimeter, examining the weathered wood and rusted hinges. She told herself it was just curiosity, that she wasn't planning to go inside. But deep down, she knew better. One evening, as twilight settled over the land, Clara sat alone in the living room, surrounded by boxes of Henry's belongings. Sorting through them had been a project she'd avoided for years, too afraid of stirring up old emotions. But now, spurred by the journal entry, she dove in with determination. Box after box revealed fragments of their shared past photographs, letters, trinkets, and keepsakes. Most items brought smiles or tears, reminders of happy times. But then, tucked beneath a stack of faded receipts, she found something unexpected, an envelope marked with her name. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Henry's handwriting. It wasn't dated, but the ink had faded slightly, suggesting it was written years ago. The message began simply enough. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to protect you, or maybe it means I failed to protect you in the first place. Either way, I need you to know how much I love you. You've, been my heart, my anchor, my reason for waking up each morning. Without you, I wouldn't have survived half the things I've faced in this life. Clara paused, her throat tightening. She hadn't expected such raw emotion. Henry rarely expressed himself this openly, even in his letters. Encouraged, she continued reading, There's something I've kept hidden from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I loved you too much to risk losing you. The truth is, I carry a secret that has shaped my entire life. It's something I can't undo, no matter how hard I try. All these years, I've done everything in my power to shield you from it, hoping we could build a future free of the mistakes I made before I met you. But secrets have a way of finding their way to the surface, don't they? Clara's pulse quickened. What was he talking about? What kind of secret could possibly be so devastating? She read on, desperate for clarity. If you ever find yourself standing outside the barn, questioning whether to step inside, know this, whatever you discover won't change who I am or who you are. Love doesn't disappear because of the past. It grows stronger when faced with the truth. So, if you decide to open those doors, do it knowing that my love for you will always remain unchanged, no matter what lies within. By the time Clara finished reading, tears streamed down her face. The letter raised more questions than it answered, but one thing was clear. Henry had known she might eventually break her promise. He hadn't condemned her for it, he'd prepared her for it. That night, sleep eluded Clara. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Henry's words in her mind. His confession was both heartbreaking and comforting. On one hand, it confirmed that he'd been hiding something significant. On the other hand, it reassured her that his love for her had never wavered. Whatever was in the barn, it didn't diminish the life they'd shared, it added depth to it. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Clara made up her mind. She couldn't live another day without knowing the truth. The barn had stood silent for 35 years, guarding its secrets. But today it would speak. With trembling hands, Clara dressed warmly and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-covered grass. She walked slowly toward the barn, her heart pounding like a drum. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself was trying to hold her back. But she pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. When she reached the barn, she paused, taking a moment to steady her breathing. The wooden doors looked ancient, their surface cracked and splintered from years of neglect. A rusted padlock hung loosely from the handle, its mechanism long since broken. Clara reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. With a deep breath, she slid the lock free and pushed the doors open. A rush of stale air greeted her, carrying the faint smell of hay and damp wood. Gust motes floated lazily in the shafts of light streaming through gaps in the walls. The interior was dim but not entirely dark, revealing a space frozen in time. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, sacks of feed sat stacked against the far wall, and cobwebs draped every surface like delicate lace. But it wasn't until Clara stepped deeper inside that she saw it, the reason behind Henry's prohibition. In the center of the barn stood a wooden chest, its lid slightly ajar. Her breath caught in her throat as she approached it, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be where Henry's secret lay hidden? Kneeling beside the chest, Clara hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. Part of her wanted to turn back, to leave the past undisturbed. But another part, a stronger part, knew she couldn't stop now. Slowly, she opened the lid fully, revealing stacks of letters addressed to her, letters written over the course of their entire marriage but never sent. Each envelope contained heartfelt confessions, apologies for arguments they'd had, dreams he'd been too afraid to share, and declarations of love so raw they took her breath away. Among the letters was a single photograph of a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Clara herself. On the back, scrawled in Henry's familiar handwriting, were the words, "My first love, my deepest regret." Clara fell to her knees, clutching the photograph to her chest. The pieces began falling into place. Henry's protectiveness, his secrecy, his insistence that she never enter the barn. He had carried this burden alone, shielding her from a truth that might have shattered their lives for hours. Clara sat amidst the relics of Henry's hidden world, reading each letter until her vision blurred with tears. Though the revelation stung, it also brought clarity. Henry hadn't banned her from the barn because he didn't trust her. He did it because he loved her too much to risk losing her. The young woman in the photograph had been someone from his past, someone whose memory he couldn't erase but chose to bury instead. When Clara finally emerged from the barn, the weight of grief still lingered, but it was lighter somehow. She realized that understanding Henry's flaws didn't diminish her love for him, it deepened it. He had been human, flawed and imperfect, just like her. Clara sat on the dusty floor of the barn, surrounded by letters and memories that had been locked away for decades. Her hands trembled as she held one envelope after another, each containing a piece of Henry's heart that he'd never shared. With her, it was overwhelming, like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, unsure whether to dive in or step back. But there was no turning away now. She had come this far, and she owed it to herself and to Henry to face whatever truths lay. Hidden within those pages, the first letter she opened was dated just a few months after their wedding. In it, Henry wrote about how much he loved waking up beside her every morning, how her laughter brightened even his darkest days. But then, toward the end, his tone shifted. He confessed that he still thought about the woman in the photograph, the one Clara now clutched tightly in her hand. "I didn't think I'd ever love anyone again," he wrote. "But meeting you changed everything. You gave me hope when I thought I deserved none." Tears blurred Clara's vision as she read those words. For years, she had wondered if Henry truly loved her or if she was simply someone who came along to fill a void. Now, she realized how wrong she had been. His feelings for her were real, deep, and unwavering, but so was the guilt he carried from his past. That guilt must have weighed heavily on him, shaping the man he became, protective, secretive, and fiercely devoted to keeping her safe even if it meant hiding parts of himself. She moved on to another letter, this one written during a particularly difficult time in their marriage. They had argued often back then, over little things like finances and bigger ones like dreams they couldn't agree on. In the letter, Henry apologized for being stubborn and distant. "I know I hurt you," he admitted, "and I hate myself for it. The truth is I'm scared. Scared that if you knew the whole story, you'd leave me. And I don't think I could survive losing you." Clara paused, letting those words sink in. She remembered those arguments vividly, the frustration, the tears, the nights spent sleeping on opposite sides of the bed. At the time she had chalked it up to stress or miscommunication, but now she understood. Henry wasn't just fighting with her. He was fighting against his own fears. Fears of rejection, of judgment, of having his deepest secrets exposed. No wonder he had worked so hard to keep her away from the barn. This place wasn't just a storage shed, it was a vault holding the pieces of his soul he couldn't bear to share. As the hours passed, Clara read through more letters, each one revealing a new layer of Henry's life. There were stories about his childhood, memories of his first love, reflections on mistakes he wished he could undo. Some entries made her smile, while others brought fresh waves of sorrow. But through it all, one thing remained constant: his love for her. Even in his darkest moments, even when he doubted himself, he never stopped loving her. Finally, she reached the bottom of the chest and found something unexpected, a small wooden box tucked beneath the stack of letters. Its surface was smooth and polished, unlike the rough, weathered wood of the chest. Clara hesitated before opening it, her heart pounding. What else could Henry have left behind? Was this the final piece of the puzzle? Inside the box, she discovered two items, a delicate silver necklace and a folded piece of paper. The necklace was simple but beautiful, its pendant shaped like a tiny bird in flight. Clara recognized it immediately. It belonged to the woman in the photograph. She had seen her wearing it in other pictures tucked away in old albums. Holding it in her hands felt strange, almost sacred, like touching a piece of history she wasn't. Meant to see, the note accompanying the necklace was short but powerful. This was hers, Henry wrote. She loved birds. Sighed, they reminded her of freedom. I kept it because it reminded me of her and of the promise I made to myself never to let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. Until you came along. You taught me that love isn't about protecting yourself from pain. It's about risking everything for something greater. Clara's chest tightened as she absorbed those words. For so long, she had believed that Henry's secrecy stemmed from mistrust or indifference. But now she saw the truth. He had loved her so deeply that he was willing to carry the weight of his past. Alone rather than risk losing her, he hadn't. Pushed her away, he had pulled her closer, shielding her from the storms brewing inside him. By the time Clara finished reading the last letter, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the barn in shadows. Exhausted but unable to leave, she leaned against the wooden wall and let the silence wash over her. The air smelled of dust and aged wood, but beneath it, she could almost sense Henry's presence as if he were sitting beside her. Watching her with those kind eyes of his for the first time in years, Clara felt a sense of peace. Yes, the revelations were painful. Yes, they forced her to confront aspects of Henry she had never imagined. But they also painted a fuller picture of the man she had loved, not the perfect husband she had idealized, but a flawed, complex human being who had fought his own battles and still chosen to give her his heart. Slowly, she gathered the letters and placed them back into the chest, careful to preserve their order. As she closed the lid, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Henry, for loving me enough to keep your secrets and for trusting me enough to leave them behind." When Clara finally stepped out of the barn, the cool night air hit her like a refreshing wave. Stars twinkled overhead, scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds. She took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in years. The heaviness of unanswered questions had lifted, replaced by a bittersweet clarity. She didn't have all the answers, she probably never would, but she had enough to move forward over the next few days. Clara found herself drawn back to the barn again and again. Each visit brought a mix of emotions: sadness for the pain Henry had endured, gratitude for the love they had shared, and determination to honor his memory in her own way. She began cleaning out the space, sweeping away decades of dust and cobwebs. The tools and sacks of feed were long useless, so she donated what she could and repurposed the rest. Slowly but surely, the barn transformed from a relic of the past into a sanctuary for her present. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, Clara stumbled upon an old set of paints she hadn't touched in years. Inspired by the newfound purpose filling her days, she decided to use them. Setting up an easel in the barn, she started painting scenes from her life, with Henry, their first dance at their wedding, lazy summer afternoons spent fishing by the creek, quiet evenings sitting together on the porch. The act of creating brought her comfort, allowing her to process everything she had learned in a way that felt meaningful. Word of Clara's project spread quickly among her family and friends. Her grandchildren visited more often, eager to help clean the barn or listen to stories about Henry. One day, her daughter arrived with a camera, capturing photos of Clara surrounded by her artwork. "You should write a book," her daughter suggested. "People would love to hear your story." At first, the idea seemed ridiculous. Who would want to read about her ordinary life? But the more she thought about it, the more appealing it became. Writing wasn't just about sharing her experiences, it was about making sense of them, weaving together the threads of joy and sorrow into something beautiful. So, Clara began jotting down notes, piecing together fragments of her life with Henry and the lessons she had learned along the way. Months turned into years, and the barn became a symbol of renewal for Clara. Where once it had stood as a monument to secrets and silence, it now thrived as a place of creativity and healing. Visitors often remarked on its charm, marveling at the colorful murals covering the walls and the cozy seating area Clara had created. She even started hosting small gatherings there, inviting neighbors to share meals and stories under the flickering glow of string lights. Through it all, Clara carried Henry's memory with her, not as a burden but as a gift. She understood now that love wasn't about perfection. It was about embracing imperfections, facing challenges together, and finding beauty in the messy, unpredictable journey of life. Though Henry was gone, his presence lingered in every corner of the barn inn, the letters she cherished, the artwork she created, and the legacy of love she continued to build. And as Clara stood in the doorway one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, she smiled, knowing that she had finally found peace not just with Henry, but with herself. Clara's life had changed in ways she never expected after opening the barn. What started as a journey to uncover long-buried secrets turned into something far greater, a rediscovery of herself. The barn, once a symbol of mystery and fear, became her sanctuary. It was no longer just a place filled with old tools and dusty corners. It was alive with color, warmth, and purpose. Every brushstroke on the walls told a story, not only of her life with Henry, but also of her growth as a person. As the months rolled by, Clara found joy in creating art. She painted scenes that reminded her of happier times, sunsets over the fields, lazy afternoons fishing by the creek, and quiet evenings spent sitting together on the porch. But she also painted moments of struggle, the arguments, the silences, the unanswered questions. Each piece was honest, raw, and deeply personal. Through painting, Clara learned to express emotions she hadn't known how to put into words before. Art became her therapy, her way of processing everything she'd uncovered about Henry and about herself. Her family noticed the change in her almost immediately. Her daughter, who visited regularly, commented on how much lighter Clara seemed. "You're glowing, Mom," she said one afternoon while helping hang up new paintings. "What's your secret?" Clara laughed softly, glancing around the transformed barn. "I think I finally understand what love really means," she replied. "It's not about having all the answers or being perfect. It's about accepting each other's flaws and finding beauty in the imperfections." Her daughter nodded thoughtfully, then teased, "Well, maybe you should write a book about it. People would eat this up?" At first, the idea sounded absurd to Clara, who would care about her little life in this tiny town. But the more she thought about it, the more intrigued she became. Writing wasn't just about sharing her story, it was about piecing together the fragments of her past and making sense of them. So she started jotting down notes. At night, when the house was quiet, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and wrote page after page. Some entries were short reflections, while others were detailed accounts of specific memories. Over time, these notes grew into chapters, forming the foundation of what would eventually become a memoir. Word of Clara's project spread quickly among her friends and neighbors. One day, a local bookstore owner stopped by during one of Clara's barn gatherings. After seeing the vibrant murals and hearing snippets of her story, he suggested hosting a small event to showcase her work. "People need to hear this," he said earnestly. "Your story could inspire so many others." Clara hesitated at first. Sharing her life so openly felt vulnerable, almost scary. But deep down, she knew it was the right thing to do. If her journey could help even one person find peace or healing, then it would be worth it. So, she agreed. The evening of the event arrived, and the barn looked magical. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, casting a warm glow across the colorful walls. Tables were set up with copies of Clara's manuscript, along with snacks and drinks provided by her family. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers from neighboring towns gathered inside, eager to hear her speak when it was time for Clara to share her story. She stood nervously at the front of the barn, clutching a stack of papers. The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to her. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy." She started, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "But I've come to realize that real love is messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. It's about choosing to stay even when things aren't perfect. And it's about forgiving, both yourself and the people you care about." She went on to talk about Henry, the man she had loved for decades. She spoke of his kindness, his humor, and the way he had always put her needs above his own. But she also talked about his flaws, the secrets he kept, the guilt he carried, and the sacrifices he made to protect her. Henry wasn't perfect, she admitted, but neither am I, and that's okay. Love isn't about perfection, it's about connection, about seeing someone for who they truly are and loving them. Anyway, the audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others wiping away tears. When Clara finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. People lined up afterward to thank her, sharing their own stories of loss, forgiveness, and healing. Many bought copies of her manuscript, promising to spread the word about her message of hope and resilience. In the weeks that followed, Clara's memoir gained popularity beyond what she had imagined. Local newspapers wrote articles about her, and soon, publishers reached out, interested in turning her manuscript into a book. While the thought of going national excited her, Clara remained grounded. This wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about sharing her truth and honoring Henry's memory. With the help of her family, Clara worked tirelessly to polish her manuscript. They added photographs, sketches, and excerpts from Henry's letters, weaving together a tapestry of their lives. When the book was finally published, it became a bestseller not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it was real. Readers connected with Clara's honesty and vulnerability, finding comfort in her journey of self-discovery and healing. Through it all, Clara continued to spend her days in the barn, painting and writing. It had become her happy place, a space where she could reflect, create, and dream. On sunny afternoons, she often sat by the open doors, watching the wind rustle through the tall grass outside. Sometimes she would imagine Henry sitting beside her, smiling quietly as he always had, though he was gone. His presence lingered in every corner of her life, and the laughter of her grandchildren, the colors on the barn walls, and the lessons she carried in her heart. Clara realized now that love didn't end with death. It lived on, woven into the fabric of everyday moments, shaping the people we become. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stood in the doorway of the barn, gazing out at the golden fields. A gentle breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and emerged stronger on the other side. Turning back toward the barn, she smiled softly. "Thank you, Henry," she whispered, "for teaching me that love isn't about hiding, it's about revealing. For showing me that even in our darkest moments, there's light to be found. And for trusting me enough to leave your secrets behind." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Clara closed the barn doors and walked slowly back to the house. Her heart was full, her spirit renewed. Life would never be the same without Henry, but she had learned to carry him with her, not as a burden, but as a gift. And in doing so, she had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. The barn, once a forbidden mystery, had become a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. And Clara, once weighed down by unanswered questions, had transformed into a beacon of hope for anyone searching for meaning in their own lives. Clara's journey didn't end with the publication of her memoir or the transformation of the barn into a vibrant space filled with art and memories. Instead, it marked the beginning of something new, a chapter in her life where she wasn't just living for herself, but also reaching out to others who needed guidance, comfort, or simply someone to listen. The success of her book brought unexpected opportunities. People from all over started writing to her letters, emails, even handwritten notes slipped into envelopes and mailed to her small-town address. Some shared their own stories of loss and heartache, while others sought advice on how to cope with secrets that haunted them. Clara read each message carefully, feeling a deep connection to the pain and longing expressed in those words. It reminded her of herself all those years ago, sitting alone in the barn, overwhelmed by unanswered questions. At first, she wasn't sure how to respond. How could she possibly offer wisdom when she still felt like she was figuring things out herself? But then she remembered Henry's letters, the raw honesty, the vulnerability, the courage it must have taken for him to write them, even if he never sent most of them. Inspired by his example, Clara decided to answer every single message personally. She wrote back with kindness and openness, sharing pieces of her own story while encouraging others to embrace their truths. No matter how painful they might seem, her responses weren't polished or rehearsed. They were heartfelt and genuine, much like the conversations she used to have with Henry late at night when the world outside grew quiet. "You don't have to have everything figured out," she often wrote. "Sometimes just taking one step forward is enough. And remember, you're not alone. We're all carrying burdens we can't see." Word spread quickly about Clara's willingness to connect with strangers. Soon, people began visiting her in person, traveling from nearby towns and eventually, from farther away to sit with her in the barn. They came seeking solace, inspiration, or simply a safe place to talk. Clara welcomed them all, offering tea and homemade cookies as they settled into the cozy seating area she had created. The barn, once a private refuge, became a gathering spot for shared stories and healing. One visitor, a young woman named Rachel, though Clara thought of her simply as the girl with the red scarf, stood out among the rest. She arrived on a chilly autumn afternoon, clutching a worn journal close to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously around the barn as Clara greeted her warmly. "Come in," Clara said gently. "There's always room for one more." Rachel hesitated before stepping inside, clearly unsure of what to expect. But as she looked around, at the colorful murals and shelves lined with books and trinkets, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "This place is beautiful," she murmured, running her fingers along the edge of a wooden table. Clara smiled. "It wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, it was dark and dusty, full of secrets I was too afraid to uncover. Now, it's my favorite place in the world." That day, Rachel stayed for hours, talking about her struggles with grief after losing her father unexpectedly. Like Clara, she had been left with unanswered questions and a sense of emptiness that nothing seemed to fill. As they sat together sipping tea, Clara listened intently, nodding and offering gentle words of encouragement. By the time Rachel left, tears streaming down her face but a faint smile tugging at her lips, Clara knew she had made a difference. Stories like Rachel's became common. Over time, Clara realized that helping others heal was giving her a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just honoring Henry's memory by keeping his letters safe or turning the barn into a tribute to their love. She was continuing the legacy of kindness and compassion he had shown her throughout their marriage. In a way, Henry was still with her, guiding her steps and reminding her of the importance of connection. As winter approached, Clara decided to host regular gatherings in the barn, inviting anyone who wanted to join. She called them evenings of reflection, informal events where people could come together to share stories, listen to music, or simply sit quietly under the twinkling fairy lights. On some nights, local musicians performed soft melodies on guitars or violins. Other times, Clara read excerpts from her memoir or recited poems she had written during quiet moments alone. No two evenings were the same, but each one carried a sense of warmth and community that drew people back again and again. During one particularly memorable evening, a man stood up unexpectedly and began speaking. His voice trembled as he recounted the story of his brother, who had passed away years earlier after a long illness. "I never got to say goodbye properly," he admitted, his hands gripping the edges of his chair. "And now, I feel like I'm stuck in this loop of guilt and regret." The room fell silent as everyone turned to listen. Clara watched him closely, recognizing the weight of unspoken emotions in his words. When he finished, she stood up slowly and walked over to him. Placing a hand on his shoulder, she said softly, "It's never too late to say goodbye. Sometimes we carry the people we've lost inside us, and that's okay. Talk to him, write him a letter, visit his favorite places. Keep him alive in your heart." Tears streamed down the man's face as he nodded, visibly moved by her words. Later, several attendees approached Clara to thank her for creating such a supportive environment. "I didn't think I'd find a place like this," one woman said, "where people understand without needing explanations." Clara's impact extended beyond the barn as well. Local schools invited her to speak to students about resilience and finding strength in difficult times. Churches asked her to lead workshops on forgiveness and healing. Even businesses reached out, hoping she could inspire employees to approach challenges with empathy and grace. Though these engagements kept her busy, Clara embraced them wholeheartedly, knowing that her experiences could help others navigate their own struggles despite her growing influence. Clara remained humble. She never considered herself an expert or a guru. She was simply someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger because of it. Her advice was practical and rooted in real-life lessons. Take things one day at a time, lean on the people who care about you, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. These principles resonated deeply with those who heard them, reminding them that healing wasn't about achieving perfection, it was about progress. However small, as spring returned, bringing with it fresh blooms and warmer days, Clara reflected on how much her life had changed since opening the barn. What had once been a source of fear and uncertainty had become a beacon of hope and transformation, not just for her, but for countless others. The barn itself continued to evolve, its walls covered in new paintings and quotes contributed by visitors. Each addition told a story, adding layers of meaning to the space. On sunny mornings, Clara liked to sit outside the barn, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. She often thought about Henry then, wondering what he would think of everything that had happened. Would he be proud of her? Would he approve of the way she had turned his secrets into something positive? Deep down, she believed he would. After all, he had taught her the value of love, patience, and forgiveness, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, steady presence he had always offered. One afternoon, as she sat sketching in her notebook, her granddaughter joined her, plopping down onto the grass beside her. "Grandma," she said curiously, "do you ever miss Grandpa?" Clara paused, pencil hovering above the page. "Every day," she replied honestly, "but missing him doesn't mean I'm sad. He's still here in the stories I tell, in the lessons I've learned, in the love I give to others. That's how people stay alive, you know? Through the connections we keep." Her granddaughter nodded thoughtfully, then grinned mischievously. "So does that mean I'll get to hear more embarrassing stories about him someday?" Clara laughed, ruffling the girl's hair. "Oh, absolutely. Just wait until you're older." They spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, surrounded by the sights and sounds of nature. For Clara, moments like these were precious reminders of why she had chosen to open herself up, to face the past, embrace the present, and look toward the future with hope. Life wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but that was okay. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, staying true, and finding beauty in the signs of it all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara stood up and stretched. Her granddaughter followed suit, linking arms with her as they walked back toward the house. Behind them, the barn stood tall and proud, its doors wide open, welcoming anyone brave enough to step inside and begin their own journey of discovery. Clara glanced over her shoulder, smiling softly. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready.